She had spent her entire school life carrying the weight of every insult like stones tied to her chest, yet she kept walking through those halls, hoping that one day she would matter to someone. She was always the quiet one sitting at the last desk, or eating alone under the staircase where nobody would notice her tears. Every person in that building knew her name only because they needed someone weaker to push around, and she had become that target without ever choosing to be. They called her strange, lazy, awkward, poor, and every hurtful word that a young heart should never have to endure. Yet through all of it she held on to one secret belief that life would not end inside that cruel circle, and that the world was bigger than their small judgments. 10 years passed after graduation, and everyone else moved on with their lives, but the cruelty they carried inside them stayed the same. When the school planned a reunion, her former classmates created a group and filled it with messages that carried the same old bitterness. Someone suggested inviting her just to laugh at how little she must have changed. Another joked that she probably still wore the same old shoes from school, and someone else said she would show up looking like a failure who never escaped her unlucky life. None of them knew the truth, that while they wasted years feeding their pride, she had spent those same years rebuilding herself from the ashes of everything they destroyed. The reunion evening arrived with bright lights and loud music filling the decorated hall. Former students wore expensive clothing and posed for pictures acting like life had been kind to them, though many of them were battling emptiness they refused to admit. They bragged about jobs, cars, holidays, and lifestyles, trying hard to impress each other, because deep inside they had never grown out of the competition they started as teenagers. But amid all the noise, one question kept floating around again and again. Was she really coming? Would she look the same? Would she still be the weak girl they remembered, or would she arrive with shoulders still bent under invisible shame? Outside the city, a helicopter rested quietly on a rooftop helipad, and she stood beside it taking slow breaths as the wind brushed softly through her hair. She no longer looked like the girl they had mocked. Her posture was straight, her presence calm, and her eyes carried the strength born from years of struggle that no one had witnessed. She wore a simple, elegant dress and carried herself with a dignity that came from knowing she had survived darkness alone. The memories still lived inside her, but they no longer controlled her. She knew she did not owe anyone anything, yet she chose to attend the reunion not for revenge, but to face the last ghost from her past. As the helicopter lifted into the sky, the city lights shimmered below her like a new world built far away from the pain she once lived through. She looked out at the horizon, feeling something she had not felt in a long time. Freedom, not the kind that comes from wealth or success, but the kind that comes from healing. She remembered the girl she used to be, the one who cried silently and prayed for one person to be kind to her. She whispered inside her mind that she had kept going for that girl, and that this moment belonged to her. At the reunion hall, people laughed, drank, and continued making cruel jokes about her without realizing how small their world had become. They expected her to walk in quietly with her eyes lowered and her confidence shattered. They had no idea that she had built her own company from nothing, created opportunities for others, and risen higher than anyone had imagined. They had no idea that the girl they once labeled as useless had become a woman capable of arriving in the sky. The sound came suddenly, a deep, powerful thrum that made the windows tremble. Everyone paused. The music softened, the laughter faded into confusion. People rushed outside to see what was happening, and then they saw it approaching from above. A helicopter descending slowly into the school field, surrounded by evening light so soft it felt unreal. The very sight silenced every voice that once mocked her, not because of the machine, but because they felt the shift in the air, as if life itself was telling them that they had been wrong all along. The helicopter landed gently, and the door opened. She stepped out with quiet confidence, nothing exaggerated, nothing loud, just presence, pure and undeniable. Her former classmates stared with wide eyes as if the world had suddenly rewritten everything they believed. She walked across the field calmly, and every step felt like a victory for the girl she used to be. They watched her knowing that the label they gave her had turned into the mirror of their own failures. They had mocked her for being small, and now she stood taller than all of them, without needing a single word. She entered the hall, and the silence followed her like a shadow. People moved aside, not out of fear, but out of the weight of their guilt. The ones who had insulted her the most felt something they had never felt before: shame, real heavy shame, not because of her success, but because they finally saw how cruel they had been to someone who never deserved any of it. Near the end of the gathering, when the atmosphere had softened, and people had begun to understand something deeper, she looked around the hall and felt no anger. She felt closure. She felt peace. The night that was supposed to be another chance for them to mock her had become the night they learned their greatest lesson. If this story touched your heart, please support with like, share, and subscribe, because kindness and growth matter more than anything. Before the story ends, please leave a comment telling what part inspired you the most.